Hey everyone, and welcome to Ruben's Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder what someone is actually thinking when they rate their suicidal urges on a scale of 0 to 10? It is a question that researchers have been grappling with, and a new study is using some pretty fascinating technology to peek inside. So this is a study looking at what people actually mean when they answer questions about suicidal thoughts and urges. We use these scales all the time in research and in doctors' offices to try and figure out how much someone is struggling. But how do we know if a 6 for one person means the same thing as a 6 for another person? And does a 6 today mean the same thing as a 6 next week for that same person? This is super important because these ratings can have big consequences, like whether someone needs hospitalization. Think about it if you are asked how strong your urge to kill yourself is on a scale from 0 to 10. That number is supposed to tell us something important, right? But what does that number really represent inside someone's head? Do they compare it to past feelings? Do they have a secret internal scale that nobody else understands? This research wanted to figure that out. The researchers got smart about this. Instead of just taking the number, they asked people to explain why they gave that number. They asked things like, if you selected a 5, what thoughts about suicide would you be having? And also, what other thoughts not related to suicide would you be having? They even asked if they saw any images in their mind. This is key because usually analyzing all those written answers is a ton of work for humans. But they use something called large language models, or LLMs, the same kind of technology that powers things like ChatGPT, to help them sort through thousands of these written answers. They developed a cool two-stage process. First, they used a method called BERTopic to group similar answers together, but they found that sometimes similar ideas were spread out, or different ideas got clumped together. So, in the second stage, they used a really powerful LLM to go back and refine these groupings, making sure that the categories or topics, as they call them, were as accurate and meaningful as possible. This is like having a super smart assistant who can understand nuances in language. In study 1, they worked with 158 adolescents who had experienced suicidal thoughts or behaviors in the past year. They asked them these open-ended questions at the beginning and then again a month later. And what did they find? Well, they identified 13 distinct topics that describe what people are thinking about when they have suicidal urges. Things like depressed and exhausted, which is pretty straightforward, and suicide method, plan, or preparations, which is exactly what it sounds like. They also found active desire and/or intent to kill oneself, and even things like happy life thoughts, which surprisingly popped up. It is interesting to see that even when people reported low suicidal urges, like a rating of 0, some of their explanations revealed a bit of passive suicidal ideation, meaning they might wish they were dead but not necessarily have a plan or intent to act. This is a crucial finding because it suggests that a rating of 0 might not always mean a complete absence of suicidal thoughts, potentially leading us to underestimate the frequency of these experiences. Then, in study 2, they repeated this with 202 young adults. They made a couple of tweaks here. They gave participants a clear definition of what a suicidal urge meant to reduce confusion. They also shortened the follow-up time to just 1 week. The results from study 2 largely echoed study 1, but with some nuances, they identified 14 topics this time. Depressed and exhausted was still a big one, as was anxiety and distress, and importantly, no thoughts of suicide. They also found that topics like suicide method, plan, or preparations, and active desire and/or intent to kill oneself tended to show up more at the higher ratings, like an 8, 9, or 10. Now, let's get to the really mind-blowing part, consistency. They looked at 2 types of consistency. First, between-person consistency. Does a rating of, say, a 6 mean the same thing for person A as it does for person B? And second, within-person consistency. Does a rating of a 6 mean the same thing for person A today as it does for person A next week? The big takeaway here is that consistency was highest at the extreme ends of the scale, meaning a 0 or a 10. When people rated their urges as very low or very high, their explanations tended to be more similar to others with the same rating and more consistent for themselves over time. But in the middle, say ratings 2 through 7, there was a lot more variation. People could give the same number but describe quite different experiences. This is a really important finding. It suggests that when people are in a state of very low or very high suicidal urgency, their experience is more clearly defined. But in those middle, moderate ranges, the meaning of the number gets a lot fuzzier. It is not just about how distressed someone is, but how they interpret and report that distress. And this ambiguity, this difference in interpretation persists even within the same person over time. It means that a change in someone's reported urge severity might not just be a change in their actual suicidal feelings, but also a change in how they understand or use the rating scale. So what does all this mean? The study shows that suicidal urges aren't just one simple thing. They are a complex mix of thoughts, feelings, and even images. The meaning of the numbers we use to rate them isn't always clear, especially in the middle ranges. And what a number means can really differ from person to person and even for the same person at different times. Now, no study is perfect. The researchers point out that choosing the exact number of topics can be a bit subjective. Also, in study 2, the participants' answers were longer and sometimes blended multiple themes, which future research might need to handle differently, perhaps by allowing multiple topic assignments for a single response. And importantly, participants were asked to imagine hypothetical situations rather than describe urges in real time. This might not fully capture the intensity of an acute suicidal state. Also, both samples were predominantly white and from the US, so we need to be careful about generalizing these findings to other groups and cultures. But despite these limitations, the core message is powerful. These numbers we use to measure suicidal urges are not as straightforward as we might think. They capture a much richer and more varied set of experiences. This doesn't mean we should stop using these scales, but it does mean we need to be more thoughtful about interpreting them. Pairing these simple numerical ratings with a brief open-ended question, like they did in this study, could give us a much deeper understanding of what someone is truly going through. It is about moving towards more personalized and precise ways of understanding and addressing suicide risk. I think this research is a really great example of how technology like LLMs can help us unlock deeper insights into human psychology. By analyzing open-ended responses at scale, we can start to understand the nuanced experiences behind seemingly simple numbers. It opens up possibilities for better suicide prevention and intervention strategies that are more tailored to the individual. What are your thoughts on this research? Do you think LLMs are going to revolutionize how we study mental health? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Ruben's Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.